So we'll go ahead and get started. So I'm presenting to you today information about adult learners, and considering that we have 45 minutes to talk about adult learners, that's not enough time. I mean, people study this as a like this is like their major, or they get a master's in this kind of thing. So I don't believe that this is going to be all encompassing, but it's just kind of like quick tips, things that I feel are probably things that will hit your world immediately that you would want maybe just some strategies around. And then maybe if there's, I have this form that I'm going to have you fill out during the presentation where one of the questions is, what's one aspect of teaching adult learners that you would like to explore further? I'd like to get that feedback from you because maybe that'd be a great thing for us to cover in one of our staff meetings that we have during the summer session. Okay, so I will pass that out, and I will pass out the handout relating to characteristics and needs of adult learners. Could I have volunteer to pass out? So you're going to get two papers. Again, one is that kind of feedback form, and then the other one is a chart that I thought was going to be, when I read it, I was like, I think this is really helpful with just thinking about like the key characteristics of adult learners and the needs that that they have. And I know that it's getting passed out now, but for those of you who've had experience maybe working with adults and those in kind of like the K through 12 world of students, what do you identify or anticipate if you're new to teaching adults? What do you know or anticipate as being the key difference between working with children and working with adults, like in terms of their learning needs or their learning profile? Let's just get some kind of share out ideas going. Yes?
I mean, I think it's important for students of all ages, but it's especially important to approach them as an adult, like not talk down to adult learners or seem condescending because you might be younger than them, and that can be just to be sensitive of that.
Okay, so children versus adult learners. So I'm wondering how we can frame that. So say it one more time, and then I'll try to think of how I want to shorten it.
Sensitivity towards, sensitivity and respect towards, I don't know how to phrase this.
Okay.
I'm gonna be
Oh yes. Let's see how we can.
I've taught a lot of adults, and sometimes, or people who are older than me, and being aware and sensitive to the fact that they may. Yeah, I guess it is a little bit hard.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Right?
And I think I have an idea too, but let me just see if I can get this.
I mean, one aspect of it is that adults tend to have their own goals, and especially the younger they are, the children tend to be, the goals are determined by teachers and parents and guardians.
Okay.
So, yeah, I mean, and that changes how you address them, where you're, sort of telling students what they need to be doing when they're young, and adults, you're more relating to what they're, I mean, you should do this with people of all ages, but it's especially, important with adults.
Yes, yeah, definitely. So every learner would love to have some autonomy in their learning and some choice in their learning, but what we find is that adults come to school for specific reasons, or they go back to school for specific reasons, whereas children kind of have like this pacing of like, okay, this is what kindergartners do, this is what first graders do, this is what second graders do. So like there's actually like a script or a pathway for them that is that is created by others. Whereas adults, they may have their own plan in mind as to why they're going back. They may be going back for vocational skill, they may be going back to develop those literacy skills because they never got them, but like they have a very specific goal that they would like to accomplish when they come in.
I think I was going to say choice.
Okay.
And adults come with, they choose to come.
Okay.
Usually become learners.
Oops. It's still in that bit there. Whereas children are mandated in most cases.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, okay. What else? Yes.
Kind of maybe what Rose was saying, that adult learners are able to infuse their what they're being told. So being able to have outside experiences apply. For example, I was at a 5P site last week, and we were reading an article about civil rights movement, and the adult was able to like
Tell you what happened right then. Yeah.
and like that is just such an enriching experience for me and probably for them, because they're able to like understand a bigger context that they live in.
Sure, absolutely. And so by then contrast, children in many cases are like a clean slate. It's like they're learning from you the first time. Okay. What else?
Being aware that potentially some older people, older students might be a little, I don't want to say resentful, but sensitive to being taught by someone younger. That doesn't happen all the time, but I've had that experience before. I've actually had someone say to me, I overheard somebody say, I don't need to listen to this young punk. So, I mean, just being aware that might be a potential, and very rare in my experience, but. Yeah.
So possible sensitivity to age gap. Not always, but when it does happen, yeah, it's okay.
It's
Whereas
not
children may not necessarily have that.
We're laughing back here about the older, but I think that's I think that's part of it. It's like it's a spectrum of children and adults, because like in some groups I would be considered an older person, and then in some groups I would be just considered average.
Right.
And then even with the children too, maybe some children learned about the civil rights movement at home from a young age, and then so they might know about it, but then others might not. And so it's always like a spectrum. And I was thinking too in terms of like teaching in the jails where the goals are like the students are to a certain extent self-motivated, but the goals are also still dictated by others in a certain sense. So it's and that there are days, and I like because this was my first job with 5Ps working with adult learners, and so I thought, okay, everyone will just come to class every day and want to learn. And there's lots of reasons and lots of days when there are people in the classes who will put their head down, and it's not really, it's not that they don't want to learn. The same as it is with adolescents. It's not that they don't want to learn, it's that something else is going on.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to throw that out there, because for anyone who's like new to teaching in the jails, that was like, I was like, oh, that was kind of surprising to me. I didn't expect that people would come out to class and like not participate, but there's a lot of reasons why.
Yeah, and I'm struggling with how to articulate that, but yeah, there is this kind of like life happens, there's emergencies that adults face that sometimes impede their learning because maybe they have childcare issues if they're in a community site, or if they have bad news in court if they're in custody, and like those things kind of day to day.
Yeah, and it's the same that impedes children's learning.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
There's, all the research that's coming out about like how trauma affects people's ability to not just participate on the day to day, but in the long term. And so, like so many of our students, especially in the jails, but in our community sites too, have been immersed in, in and out or completely in a traumatic experiences from a young age. So they bring that with them. And so, I mean, it creates a layer of challenge for us as educators to kind of work with that and be sensitive to that.
Thank you. No, that's a really good point. And I just want to go back before I get more ideas of the differences. As Shanley was talking too, it's I would say that like when we talk about that spectrum and stuff, I feel like with adults there's more of that heterogeneous group, whereas like it's going to be different by age, cultural background. Like it's just going to seem like a more mixed group than sometimes with children, because at the very least the children are in the classes of their age. So like all the fifth graders are together, and we know that they're going to be approximately 10 years old or 11 years old. But, you know, with adults, it's like, it's just a big range. It's from 18 to 70, right? Like depending on where you work. So, that's why I kind of added that piece on. And then, yeah, the life happens. It's like it's different with both groups, but yeah, there is kind of like a trauma or emergency thing that can happen that can impact both groups. It's just going to be different for children and adults. Yes, I'm sorry, you're
I was thinking about the relationship between student and teacher with, you know, I teach 5th grade, and it's a very different relationship that I had when I was teaching or sitting with adults, you know, facilitating their learning. So I was found myself being more aware of their life experiences. I was more aware of where they were coming from, and I had to navigate more carefully because I didn't want to isolate them or intimidate or some patronize. So there's a definitely different power structure between adults as, you know, as opposed to adult and a child.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, and that's why I added it to this one because I felt like it was related, like there's more of that partnership that you would want to have with adults versus, you know, children. It sounds harsh there, but it's like there's still kind of that scriptedness of like what they need to learn.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, and we'll do a few more. Yes.
So another way I see that is maybe in terms of like respect. Like one is automatic and expected when you work with kids. They kind of look at you just like you're just whatever you say is just the law.
Sure.
Versus with adults, it's kind of more earned and they kind of bring in their own critical ways of thinking about you as a person.
And you have to know what you're talking about, right? Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Okay, so let's do a few more and then.
Mine was just the same. I was saying they're critical thinkers, and I think children, not youth, are more literal thinkers. I think that adults come with a more critical thinking aspect, and kids are more literal.
Sure. Last couple ones. Yes.
With children, there's more regularity and consistency in their learning, and in the classroom you have a gap between the lowest learner and the highest learner, and that can be pretty broad, but it broadens with adults. There's more gap individually in their learning. They need a lot more review to fill in the holes and what they haven't used. They'll tell me, well, I haven't used fractions for 10 or 20 years. So there's gaps that way, and then so the classroom you teach of adults has a broader breadth of abilities.
Sure.
I also think that like adults, not that kids don't know this, but I think adults at this level kind of know like what learning style fits them best. They can tell you I'm a visual learner, I'm a auditory learner, I'm visual and auditory, whereas kids sometimes like don't really know what they learn best by.
Sure.
And so they can't really tell you like, hey, I need you to lecture while I look at notes, but adults can kind of let you know like this is what I need, and then they can be more successful if you follow through on that.
So there's more of a self-advocacy that happens with adults just because of life experience and that kind of thing. Okay. Last one, please.
I think it's also just important to recognize the technology gap, especially with much older learners, that some older learners just don't have that experience kind of growing up with computers or using the internet, whereas like my niece and nephew are better than I am at technology.
Yeah.
So just that kind of range increases the wider the age gap or range is, I guess.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. So yeah, I mean, and we can go on, you know, with all the differences, but I just wanted to kind of hear from you and see what, you know, you're bringing in terms of your, you know, your own understanding and experiences with adults versus children. And yeah, I mean, these are some of the ones that to me stood out the most, is like that partnership, needing to collaborate more with the learner as opposed to kind of dictating what they do. And then also like the prior knowledge and experience, using that to your advantage as much as possible. You know, like being willing to, as an educator, make yourself vulnerable to learn from your learner sometimes, and make it a vice versa kind of experience where they're learning from you and you're learning from them. And I think that was a huge shock for me, because I felt like I need to come in and have all the knowledge. And as Rick said, you know, like some people, like especially me being a history teacher, when I taught contemporary history, there's people who knew, like they were telling me about things that happened in their community around like the civil rights movement or Vietnam or that kind of thing. And it's like, okay, I'm gonna sit down and I'm gonna let, you know, I'm gonna let you talk. But yeah, just kind of being okay with that and not feeling like it has to be like all on you every time, I think was a huge shift for me. So aside from what we kind of brainstormed, this document comes from a book that's titled Teaching Adults, a Literary Resource Book. So it's a lot of strategies on how to work with adults with literacy, but like it kind of started out with this like chart of here are the key characteristics of learners, which we hit a lot of them just through conversation. But they had about 8 different strategies or 8 different characteristics of adult learners, and then for each one they kind of gave you a list of strategies to try to address or work with that particular characteristic. And so, as a teacher, we obviously know that, I mean, just as adults ourselves, we know that adults are busy people. And so then they kind of gave, for example, the strategies of developing lesson plans that address priority needs, using teaching and learning time efficiently, being flexible with assigning work or deadlines. And that's going to definitely be the case with ISP. I mean, that's the nature of ISP, is that flexibility there. And helping the learner schedule time to do assignments. Like one strategy that a lot of ISP teachers use is, even getting a student to plan out their time that they're allocating to do their work. So I did teach ISP in custody, like in a lab environment, and I know that some students would spend like a lot of time working on a packet, and they would like get through maybe 2 pages a day, and just kind of take the scenic route with how they use like a 2-hour block of time. And so like I actually had to take a calendar with one of the students and say, okay, so if you're working on 2 pages a day for how many weeks, like you're not going to get this packet done. Like there's got to be a little bit more of a sense of urgency on your part to not take that scenic route. And it's not because they didn't understand it. Like we appropriately gave them the right packet, but it was just they were like, oh, I'll get it done, and it's like, but you're doing 2 pages a day. So just kind of doing those kind of strategies of like helping someone see like you actually have to set aside the time in order to get your work done. And a lot of people will come into 5 Keys and they'll say, how long will it take for me to get my high school diploma? It depends, right? Like it depends. So like if you're coming every day and you're dedicating a certain amount of hours to doing your work, that's going to be a lot different than you dropping in once a week or every 2 weeks just to not get dropped from, the ISP caseload and just trying to do the bare minimum. So like, I can't give anyone that answer. It's like, it really depends on you. Yes?
That question I think should be under our like Q&A that we give to the students, because how long is it going to take for me to get my diploma? Because I get that question all the time.
Yeah.
We should like exactly what you just said. I think needs to be really, because it'll be helpful to have that when we're going over the Q&A
Yeah.
with them. It'll be, like this is how long it would take. It all depends. If you maybe have little, I don't know. I think it would be helpful to have that messaging throughout our classrooms.
Like scenario
someone-
A, if you do this, then it's going to take you this long.
You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Because then it'll be helpful for us to have that
In
conversation.
math classes too, I should incorporate that into my math class because it's actually kind of like a fraction problem or a rate problem.
Right. Exactly. So yeah, so I don't want to go through this whole list like, point by point, but this is something that I thought would be useful to just kind of think about. But I do want to point out a few, like that one that I feel is an ongoing issue. People always ask me like, how long is it going to take for me to get my high school diploma? It's like I can't give you that answer, but we can plan out, and that's why we have kind of a map to graduation form that we'll share with you later on, because depending on how many credits they come in with, depending on all these things, you can essentially pace out like how long it could take, but it's really on them and what they're able to do and what they're willing to do. So it's like the combination of those two. Another thing that I wanted to just draw to your attention, which one is it? Okay, so the one that's right underneath actually, have to deal with emergencies and unexpected situations, like as we mentioned there, life happens for adults. So for those of you who are in ISP, you are going to, in many cases, be the one person, the one teacher at your site. Many of the sites, it's like Little House on the Prairie. It's just the one teacher who kind of covers everything. So, just making sure that, you are in constant communication with your students is going to be really key. If you haven't seen them in a while, we do have Google phone numbers that you can use to call students and try to reach out to them to see where they are, just because you want to make sure that they stay enrolled with 5 Keys, and you don't want them to get dropped. And if they had a goal of like when they wanted to graduate, remind them of that goal. It's like, hey, I haven't seen you in a while, and I know you said you wanted to get this done in 6 months. Like, you know, I really want to work with you. You know, that kind of thing. Another point from this section is this whole idea of like having alternative activities ready in case the learner did not have time to prepare for the planned lesson or missed the lesson or left work at home. Like just always being one step ahead is also a really key thing with this environment that you're going to work in. For those of you who that are going to be working in custody, you're going to have students that will come, you know, most days, but then they might have court. And then so like you got to think of ways to kind of give them opportunities to make up that work. You know, you're going to have students that, you know, the semester will start July 11th, but you're going to get some students that start July 25th or whatever, and they're going to be like, what are we doing? So like just even thinking about like what are some activities that I can give a student that on the first day, if we're in the middle of teaching something from the day before, will kind of allow them to jump in and kind of learn, you know, what they need to learn and feel acclimated into the classroom. And I know Kristen's going to kind of talk about that a little bit more today about like kind of coming up with procedures that are going to work for this kind of unpredictable environment that we have here at Black Keys. But those are just some of the ones that I thought were kind of interesting and just things to remember about kind of the environment that we work at. So I think with this chart, I think the idea is that if you meet the students' needs, then things will go well, right? So like these are all ways to meet their needs. But what happens if you tried all of these things or you're working really hard on these things and things still don't work? You know, like there's students that are disruptive or, you know, challenging and that kind of thing. So like I have a quick video that I want to show you. So this is what you can do to try to make sure that things go well. And then I also want to give you strategies of like what to do when things don't go well and maybe it's out of your control. Maybe it's just someone coming in with moods. Again, life happens, you know, things are you know, people come in with things, right? So this video is going to show you how to work with, as they call it here, difficult participants. So they characterize 4 different types of adult learners that you may face that may be, you know, difficult or challenging, and how to kind of deal with that because they aren't children, right? We know that they're not children, so like our discipline strategies are not, what we do with children is probably not going to work with them. So they just talk about how to kind of use that partnership to address some of those issues that may come up. And I will say, you know, the way that they described it is, you know, in a traditional classroom setting, but I feel like there are some strategies where even if you don't have a traditional classroom setting because you're working in ISP, you can still use some strategies to work with someone who may be challenging everything that you may be offering them or disrupting the group if like individuals are working kind of on one-on-one stuff. So just kind of see what you can pull from it based on your setting. Okay. It's only 6 minutes long. Okay, where's my phone? Sorry, everyone.
We used to do quick hand. And so Carolyn's made a good point on this, but we spent a fair amount of time. Folks, I don't know, maybe we should do quick hands up. Is it time to move on, you think? Yeah, okay, great. So let's move on and talk about the next part of this model then. Okay, so good stuff. I think we've covered most of that module. Nick, maybe in your own words, can you summarize?
I'm sorry. This is another one. This is not the one.
Sort of what you took.
I think it is. I'm sorry. I just, for some reason, it's weird.
And so Carolyn's made a good point on this, but we spent a fair amount of time. Folks, I don't know, maybe we should do quick hands up. Is it time to move on, you think? Yeah, okay, great. So let's move on and talk about the next part of this model then. Okay, so good stuff. I think we've covered most of that module. Nick, maybe in your own words, can you summarize sort of what you took as the main thing we got to do next then?
Basically what we got to do, I think, is develop a CD cover, front and back, and then move on to the CD itself and some of the artwork on that.
Okay, great. Yeah, that makes sense. Awesome, thanks.
On my job shadow on Saturday, I followed Paul all the way to Toronto, and he basically went over all the techniques he was using, the different sales approaches, and the technical
This is not the one I wanted.
So what you took as the main thing we got to do next then?
Basically what we got to do, I think, is
I don't know what I pulled up. This was not the one.
Sort of what you took as the main thing we got to do next then?
Hello, my name is Kim Bushaw. I'm one of the Family Science Specialists from the North Dakota State University Extension Service. Thank you for joining me in the last of this 4-part series on engaging adult learners. In this step, we will look at a number of different types of difficult participants and some possible ways to help everyone feel comfortable in the classroom. First, we will review the 5 principles of adult learners. Here are the 5 principles of adult learners. We've explained these in depth in the Step 1 video. This series focuses on Principle 4, Application and Action, also called engagement. People are people are people. We are all different and we all react in different ways, sometimes on the same day. We may sit quietly and thoughtfully through a class or training, taking notes and contemplating how we'll incorporate the material into our life or work. Or we may take on a whole different persona if we are with friends, if the topic is too emotional, or if we've had a rough day. This is probably true for most people. In any given class, we may have a variety of learners coming from many different situations. In this step, we will discuss some of the difficult types of participants you may encounter in your work. Sarcasm, anger, or talking unkindly about others never is acceptable as the class leader. In all cases, meeting everyone with professionalism and patience is vital. Participant 1 does not want to be here. We probably all have had times when we attended a class or training because we had to, not because we wanted to. When this happened to me, I was aware that being required by my job to be CPR certified was not the instructor's fault, but the instructor was the one in the front of the room acting cheery. So she got my scowl and bad attitude. She was a pro, however, and started the class by giving us the agenda for the day and then saying, "So, this is a mandated training for most of you. I'm sorry that you have to be here to be certified. For my part, I promise not to call on you if you don't raise your hand. You are in charge of your own learning. To those folks who are here to enjoy the session as well as learn, here we go." I must confess, when she broached it that way, I too wanted to have fun while I learned. I put away the scowl and joined the group wholeheartedly. She just did what Dolores Kern tells us to do. Work hard for the 80% of the class who wants to be there to learn. Ignore the ignorable behavior of others, and most likely they'll eventually come around. At least not challenge us. Let's face it, once in a while, this will happen with